So welcome everyone. This is workshop number I think it's number six in our 2023-2024 Program Innovation Workshop Series. My name is Jaclyn Carter. I'm an educational development consultant with the Taylor Institute for Teaching and Learning, and I support the Program Innovation Hub with the program development process and also some of the curriculum review processes that we go through at the University of Calgary. And I am delighted to be able to bring this excellent workshop to you today to talk about preparing your program budgets and what goes into those pieces as you create your new programs and what kinds of things you need to be thinking about. As we get started, I would like to, of course, acknowledge that the University of Calgary is located in the heart of Southern Alberta and that we pay tribute and acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. And the City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. We are very grateful to be doing this work here on the University of Calgary and from our homes in the surrounding areas. I am going to just go over a few learning objectives and then I'll turn it over to Kelly and Colleen to continue with the conversation. Our objectives for today are really to understand how and in what contexts a proposed program budget fits into the University of Calgary and the Ministry of Advanced Education governance and approvals processes. Some of the key considerations that you'll want to think about and assumptions that you'll want to make about your budgets. So possible risk mitigation strategies for getting through those governance pieces and what the governance committee members at APS, at GAPS, at APPC are looking for when they review those program budgets. And I am now going to turn it over to Kelly, I believe, to introduce herself and get us started.
Great, thanks so much, Jaclyn. So my name is Kelly Hoglund. I'm a Senior Specialist Academic Initiatives in the Provost's office, and I've been working with faculties and units across campus for the past several years now, developing new programs, making changes to existing programs, supporting them through that process, both the development process and then moving through the approvals process at the university and the Ministry of Advanced Education. So one of the pieces that goes into a program proposal in a lot of cases is a budget. And so we encourage the proponents in the faculties and units to connect with their finance partners. So Jaclyn, if you just want to move it ahead, I think 2 slides. Thank you. So we really encourage the proponents to work with the finance partner for their faculty or unit. And there's a lot that goes into the planning of the budgets that the faculty members do. And a lot of that work will be done with their colleagues and leadership in the faculty. So they need to identify things like how many new courses would be needed for this new program, which faculties would be responsible for teaching them, how many new people would need to be hired in which staff groups, will any physical infrastructure need renovations, and then what other kinds of expenses like marketing, recruitment, other communications and technology, etc., would need to be done. And so with these, they'll work with folks across their unit. So if their faculty has a communications and marketing area, they would work with those people to develop or figure out the cost there. And then they would be working with the leadership of their faculty really to talk about the renovations or physical and technical infrastructure that's needed. One of the really important things that they need to figure out too is the number of new students that are expected because of this program. So are these net new students to the faculty or to the institution? And that will impact the tuition revenue. So if those students are not net new students, they are students who otherwise would have gone to a different program, but they're coming into this program instead, and the overall enrollment in the faculty is the same, then there's no net new revenue. And Colleen will talk about that a lot later on. And so the proponents will connect with their finance partner, and they might have some or all of the above information, or they might just be at the beginning stages. So when they connect with the finance partner, really depends on the faculty, where they are in the development of the program and the proposal, their familiarity with the process, and what their knowns and unknowns are at the start of this process. But overall, and what we tell the faculty members is, or proponents from the different units, is really the goal of the budget is to demonstrate the long-term sustainability of the program. So are you going to have enough revenue to cover the expenses to deliver the program and a meaningful student experience? And like I mentioned, the proponents might connect with the finance partner very early or a bit later on in the process. And so I guess this just kind of backs up a little bit in terms of who's responsible for what. So I work in the Program Innovation Hub, and our group, we work with, like I said, faculties and proponents across campus and support the program development process. So every proposal has a liaison. And so that liaison is really a resource for the faculties and units. And they can provide proponents with example budgets from past proposals and connect that person to other resources across campus at the right time in the process. So a lot of times it's the liaison in the Program Innovation Hub who is encouraging the proponent to connect with their finance partner. And so the proponent, their responsibilities, as I've mentioned, is identifying their program needs. They really do need to work with their faculty or unit leadership and the finance partner on the budget development. And the reason for this is to really ensure alignment with the faculty priorities and any strategic initiatives, and to ensure that there are the resources available. And so the finance partner, their key responsibility is really to work with the proponent and the faculty leadership to develop the budget. And they can connect with the proponent, the faculty, as needed when they have questions as they're working through some of the logistics around the budget. And they're also welcome to reach out to the proposals liaison in the Program Innovation Hub with any questions as they arise. But what we find is that it generally the finance partner works mostly directly with the proponent and the leadership of the unit. So all proposals, we're talking about putting the budget together a bit for the proposal. Proposals need to go through an approvals process or governance process, both here at the university and potentially at the Ministry of Advanced Education. Some proposals need to go to the government and some don't, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is the overall process for graduate and undergraduate programs. Non-credit programs, the approvals process looks a little bit different. And if anyone has questions about that at the end, I'm more than happy to answer it. So every proposal needs to go through the faculty council, or if it's a non-academic unit, through their committee that has a responsibility to review and recommend these things forward. We also have a group on campus called the Decision Support Team. And so this group is comprised of stakeholders from around campus, such as the registrar, other folks from the registrar's office, educational development consultants from the Taylor Institute, all of us that work in the Program Innovation Hub, and is chaired by the Vice Provost Teaching and Learning and the Associate Deputy Provost. And so the purpose of the decision support team is really to provide preliminary feedback on the proposal so that it's as strong as possible before it goes through the rest of the committees. And we also have a finance partner who sits on the decision support team and reviews the budget. So every unit has their own finance partner, but we also have a finance partner that sits on DST and can provide some feedback on that budget piece, and can also connect with the finance partner who worked on the budget if there needs to be anything clarified. So graduate proposals need to go through the Faculty of Graduate Studies, and then they go to the Graduate Academic Program Subcommittee, or GAPS. And then the final stage within the university is the Academic Planning and Priorities Committee, or APPC. On the undergraduate side, this goes to the Academic Program Subcommittee and then to APPC. And proponents, they can take the proposal to the Faculty Council or the Decision Support Team in either order, but they have to go to both before they can proceed through the rest of the approvals process. So backing up a little bit before we get into approvals, what happens is usually the proponent, okay, well, there's two things that can happen. One is our unit, the Program Innovation Hub, will know ahead of time that a faculty has this idea, and we can reach out, connect with them, let them know that we're here to provide support when they're ready to move forward. A lot of other times, proponents and the faculties will reach out to us and say, hey, we're working on this proposal, wondering if we could have some support and meet with you to discuss the process. And so that begins that development of the process. So we provide the proposal templates. And I'm just gonna look here. Yeah, so we provide templates, guidance around this process. And depending on the proposal, we might provide some research and writing support as well. And we also will review all the proposals before they go to DSD, and try to identify some of the questions we anticipate the decision support team might have, and address those before the documents are submitted there. Okay, next slide, please, Jaclyn. All right, so as I mentioned before, there's lots of different types of proposals, and their routing through the governance process depends on the type of proposal. So some only need university approval. They don't need to go to the ministry. So that's proposals for new minors, new concentrations, new embedded certificates or specializations at the graduate level, new non-credit programs, suspensions, terminations, name changes, or other administrative changes to the non-credit programs, or name changes to minors and concentrations and embedded certificates and specializations. External routing, so those go to the ministry. So anything that's for a new degree, a new certificate or diploma, a load change, so that's changing the number of units of coursework in the program. So for instance, if you had a bachelor's degree program that was 120 units and you wanted to change that to 126 units, that would need to go to the government. And then name changes, suspensions, extensions of suspensions, terminations, and reactivations of programs. So depending on different factors, some proposals will need a full kind of budget table, budget assumptions section filled out in the template, and then others do not. So things that go internally, so all the yellow highlighted items in the list, they would require a full budget table. And then for the load changes, depending on if that's going to increase the revenue or increase the costs of the program, increase enrollment, that kind of thing, that may or may not need a budget. And so you'd be provided guidance on that in the meantime. And when I say you need a budget, you need that would need a full budget table. The other types of proposals, like for new minors or concentrations or specializations, for example, they might just need some bullet points outlining any revenue and any expenses associated with that program, and outlining that in kind of bullet points, but it wouldn't need a full budget table. And as with almost everything, there can be exceptions depending on the complexity or different nuances with the different types of programs being proposed. And so that's where your liaison in the Program Innovation Hub is going to be able to provide you guidance and make sure you're connecting with your finance partner to determine these things. All right, so the next slide. So these next 3 slides, Jaclyn's going to send them to you as a handout, but just in case you're not familiar with the credential nomenclature, when we're talking about the credential, we're talking about degrees, diplomas, and certificates. And then we have programs that kind of exist at the sub-degree level, so below that degree level. So if you have a Bachelor of Science in chemistry, the Bachelor of Science is really that degree. Chemistry would be the major. So there's different undergraduate sub-degree nomenclature, like majors, minors, concentrations, embedded certificates. And then at the graduate level, we have areas of study and specializations. There's a few other ones, but these are really the main ones. And so just in case you're not familiar with them or the different levels that exist within each credential, then I've got that as a handout for you. All right, so I'm going to pass this over to Colleen now to get into the nitty-gritty of the budgets and from the finance partner side.
Great, thank you, Kelly. So hi, everybody. I'm Colleen Jacobsen. I'm an Associate Director in Finance Services. And over the last several years, I was a member of DST, so reviewing the program proposals and the budget components, connecting in with finance partners on the budget pieces as needed. And so I'm just going to walk through a little bit of the thinking behind what goes into preparing the budget, sharing what the budget templates look like, and talk a little bit about things to think about when preparing budgets for proposals. So as Kelly mentioned, proposals for minors, concentrations, embedded certificates, and specializations, we don't require a full-blown budget. And the reason is when we're thinking about budgets for the program proposals, we're thinking of it from the institutional perspective. And so with these types of proposals, we don't typically have new enrollment, new revenue, new expenses coming into the institution. There may be some small costs that you could highlight in bullet point form, but we don't need a full budget for these types of proposals. And so what you will see in the proposal template for these types of proposals, Jaclyn, if you just want to go to the next slide, is just some guidance here regarding making that decision. Do I need a budget, a full-blown budget or not? And so this is the guidance that is in the template for the proposal. And as you can see, if there's no significant impact to institutional revenue or costs, then no additional budget template is required. Where we do require a budget, there are a few things to consider. So as I mentioned, we need to think about these from the institutional perspective, and that is the budget that will go into the proposal. However, faculties should also consider preparing a budget for themselves from their perspective. And where this would differ from the budget that goes into the proposal would be if there's service teaching involved. So if your program will involve students taking courses in another faculty, the tuition revenue would be shared with that teaching faculty, and that will obviously have a financial impact on your faculty as the faculty that is proposing the program. Other considerations include determining at what level the program will break even. When proposals go to the government, there's an expectation that programs should be at least break even. Understanding that in the ramp up period, so year one, maybe year two of a program, there may be some deficits, but programs need to demonstrate sustainability over the long term. And so any deficits that are shown would need explanation and documentation regarding how those deficits would be funded. Another thing to consider is the break-even point for planning purposes, so that you can think about what the faculty or units plan would be should enrollment levels, break-even enrollment levels not be achieved. So kind of thinking about your plan B. So other considerations, always documenting the assumptions that are included within your budget. And where Kelly mentioned that there's always exceptions, one of them is laddering programs. So this is where proposals might come through for a certificate, followed by a diploma, followed by a master's. These proposals tend to be a little bit, can be a little bit more complex. When thinking about the budget perspective, questions to ask are, what is the most likely student pathway, and what the timing of offering the credentials will be. So we've seen in the past proposals for all three come at once through the governance process. And in some cases, the expectation is that students will be mostly direct entry into the master's program. And so then a budget is prepared for the master's program as a whole, which covers any cost that would be incurred with the certificate and diploma. Other cases we've seen where they've come through separately. And so there are standalone budgets for the certificate and the diploma and the master's. So when laddered programs come about, probably the best thing is to have discussions with the Program Innovation Hub, the proponent, along with the finance partner to determine the best approach, because it's not always cut and dry. Okay, so when you look at the program proposal templates, there are a few appendices included in the proposals specific to the budget section. The first table you'll see relates to basically how do we generate tuition revenue. And that is a combination of enrollment, tuition rates, and course taking. And understanding the split between domestic and international students. So a little bit later, I'll walk through an Excel template that you can use to help facilitate the budget creation, as well as completing these tables. And this information is contained within there. So the next template you'll see in the proposals is basically the income statement. So tuition and related fees is obviously coming from the inputs that I just talked about. There may be a reallocation of resources from existing programs. So if the faculty is providing funding for this new program, you could indicate that funding here. Other internal sources of revenue could be revenue from other areas of the university. And there could be other types of revenue, perhaps if it's an enrollment expansion and we have confirmed government funding, that revenue could be indicated here as well. On the expense side of things, salary, wages, and benefits, fairly self-explanatory. Oh, yeah, we're still on the, yeah, thanks. The materials and contracted services, again, fairly self-explanatory. These would be things if you're incurring consulting costs or any materials costs for the program. Supporting detail for what goes into those numbers should be available. And any assumptions that, again, any assumptions that you're making with these items would be included below the tables for clarity. Other direct costs could include things like scholarships or travel. And indirect costs is where we show the central share of revenue, which is the 40% of, currently the 40% of tuition revenue and government funding that goes to central as essentially an overhead cost. So I will flip now to the Excel template that can be used in creating the budget. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. Okay, so this looks very familiar, sort of what we just went through. And so the tabs here in this file feed into this summary tab. So as I mentioned, the institutional view is what will go into the program proposal. So it's this tab here that flows into the proposal summary. These other two tabs, which I will go through briefly, are for if you would like to prepare a budget for the faculty view, and just the documentation of their tuition revenue sharing formula. So on this tab, all orange cells are input cells. Let me just go up to the top here. So key inputs are enrollment, both domestic and international, tuition rate per course, number of courses per year, if applicable, if there is a program specific fee, the number of terms over which that fee will be assessed, and an assumption regarding annual tuition increase. So when you're developing a program and you're not sure what the tuition rate should be, this is a great thing to discuss with the Program Innovation Hub, who can connect you in with the Registrar's Office or the Faculty of Grad Studies as applicable. Next here, we've got information on sessionals and GATs. So a lot of our programs require sessionals and GATs calculations. So here you're just entering the number required of each. The dollar amounts included here are based on current levels, plus the pay in lieu of vacation and benefits, plus the actual benefit rate. And for GATs, it's again the current rate with benefits being applied to the portion that is paid as salary, and no benefits paid are calculated on the portion that's paid as scholarship. So it could be that these amounts here would need to be updated in the future as rates change. They're currently based on today's rates. Other inputs include the indirect cost percentage. So we're currently at 40%, which is standard across UC, and an assumption regarding inflation. So all of those inputs above the ones related to tuition will drive your tuition revenue. If you will have other revenue sources, you can enter the amounts here. And on the salary side, expense side, I left this here for proponents to cost out. So, you know, once you've had the conversations about number of faculty, level of faculty, you can add in the dollar values here. Sessionals and GATs are coming from above. Same thing for MAPS and AAPE staff. Good idea to have supporting documentation as to what your backup is for generating the total number put here, so that should there be any questions, or if you need to validate that the amounts entered tie with what's written in the proposal, then you've got an easy track record to go back and just verify that. You can also input values for the materials and contracted services, scholarships, other direct costs. Your indirect costs are formula driven based on your inputs from above. And as I mentioned, programs should go forward with a balance, at least a break-even proposal. There may be cases, again, where in the first year or two, as the program is ramping up, there may be deficits, and documentation would be required in the proposals to explain how or where the funding would come from to cover those deficits. And so this is the piece that would flow into this proposal summary, which can then just go directly into the full proposal. As I mentioned, if service teaching is involved, you may want to prepare a faculty view because it will differ. So here you would select whether your program is graduate or undergraduate, because it will impact the tuition revenue sharing. So in this example, it's an undergraduate program. These are the same inputs as what was there previously. And the enrollment by year is done to facilitate determining the revenue that would come to the faculty by year. So no input required, it's all formula driven. Same as international. Where we do get into some differentiation is in the courses. So number of courses taught by the home faculty and by another faculty where there's service teaching. So our total number of courses is 10, which was on our institutional view. And so, oh, I see, I've got it down here. Number of courses per year is 10. So where you input would be how many courses in the home faculty in each of the years, and the subsequent service teaching courses will populate. So in this example, as the program progresses through the years, students are taking more and more courses in the home faculty. Again, tuition rates, this is not changed from the institutional view. And the split of faculty revenue. So this is taken directly from the revenue sharing formula. In this case, this is the fall winter. If your faculty is proposing a program that will be teaching in spring summer, you can refer to the revenue sharing formulas here, which have the spring summer split on them as well. So in this example, we're using fall winter. Sessional GATs, other inputs are unchanged. And here's our revenue. Home faculty, domestic and international, service teaching, domestic and international, and the central tuition. So it's the same revenue that we saw in the institutional view. The difference being now our indirect costs are going to be higher because there's a component of the revenue is service teaching that is going to another faculty. And so this now is the faculty level bottom line. There may also be cases where your program is taking students from other faculties. That would be another layer to add into this. I didn't want to get too complex or detailed in this presentation, but if that is applicable for your faculty, then finance partners can certainly reach out to me and we can work through that. I did want to mention as well that these templates have been in use for several years, and wanted to give credit to Sean Solodzinka, who kind of did the creation of the nuts and bolts of this one here. So thank you, Shauna. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. So this is another template that you will see in the program proposals. And this is just to outline any one-time costs that may be incurred with a new program. There may be things like renovations, equipment, curriculum development costs. So this table helps, it does two things. I think it helps proponents think about what are the additional costs, and also is somewhat of a budget that can be shared with the ministry. And we also ask that funding sources identified to cover those costs. So we saw in the Excel template that I walked through is that we do assume annual inflation. Typically, we use 2% on tuition revenue and 3% on salary and other expenses. Indirect costs, we talked about that. Currently, it's at 40% to cover overhead costs. We like to see identified the number and type of staff that programs are anticipating will be required. And if there are sessional hires that are planned, some rationale regarding hiring sessionals versus full-time academic staff. And if AUPE staff are not being hired, we ask that proponents identify the impacts on existing AUP staff and how the program will fit into their existing workload. So risk mitigation strategies, things to think about again. Things don't always go as planned. So we talked about determining our break-even point, but what if break-even enrollment is not achieved? What if our domestic international enrollment split is not achieved? Can we function solely on domestic enrollment? What are the must-have positions and costs, and what are the nice-to-have pieces? All of these questions will help you understand where the flex is in the budget and to make strong plans to ensure program sustainability. And that's one of the things that committees that are further down the road from DST, where I saw program proposals, those are the types of questions that that will arise in those committees. And so I think I'll flip it back over to Kelly, who will just talk about what committees look for as they make their way through the governance process.
Thanks, Colleen. So yeah, the committees are looking for a number of things as they look at the budgets for different program proposals. And of course, it goes back to that overarching question is this program sustainable to deliver in the long term? I just want you to note, though, that the Academic Planning and Priorities Committee, which is the final committee in our internal approvals process, they don't have authority to approve or disapprove of the budget. So the faculty councils are the ones who have the responsibility to ensure that the funds are allocated appropriately. But throughout the committee process, again, it goes back to that sustainability, and some of the comments we can get at committees are, these are really tight margins. How, where is that flex in the budget that Colleen was talking about? Sometimes the margins are very tight on paper because we want to show a very conservative budget going forward, but there's really more flexibility than might appear on paper. The committee members might also have questions around the salaries, around the revenue that's coming into the program, whether that's tuition revenue, internal reallocations, or government funding. A lot of times they will ask about those risk mitigation plans that Colleen was talking about. On some of the committees, we have representatives from the AUPE and MAPS and TUCFA. And so they're looking at their proposal from the lens of impacts on their staffing group. And Colleen mentioned earlier, the mention of, okay, if you're not hiring more support staff, what are the impacts on the AUPE, or what are the impacts on the MAP staff? Can this be accommodated as part of workload? So even though it might not be directly budget related, if there's no new hires in the AUPE, you won't see them in the budget because they're not there. But if they're not there, that will bring up questions that need to be addressed in the proposal. And then also, and Colleen mentioned this before as well, that rationale for hiring sessional instructors, does that align with the collective agreement for TUCFA? So those are some of the things that committees have brought up in the past. They're definitely kind of the main themes that we see when they're looking at proposal budgets. So we like to be kind of forward thinking, proactive in addressing these in the assumptions and in the line items in the budget. And then there's an accompanying document that goes with the proposals to committees called a briefing note. And like the risk mitigation, for example, some of those might make it into the briefing note to highlight that for committees. Okay, I guess we will wrap it up then. So if you are working on a program proposal and you haven't connected with the Program Innovation Hub, I encourage you to do so. You will need me or one of my colleagues to help you through the governance process, make sure that you're able to get onto the committee agendas. And then for any of the finance partners who are in the group today, I'll refer you to Colleen with any follow-up questions on the finance side. And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to us in the Program Innovation Hub as well. So I'll turn over to Jaclyn. Is there anything else before we sign off for today?
Not much from me. Just thank you everyone for your participation and your questions. We hope you found this informative, and I will, as I said, be posting a recording as well as the worksheet and the template for you on the Program Innovation Workshop Series website. And just one final plug, we've got one more workshop scheduled for this series, and that is on May 30th. At 1:00 p.m. and we're going to have Christine Martineau, our new educational development consultant in Indigenous ways of knowing, leading us through a session on incorporating Indigenous ways of knowing into program design. So we hope you can make it there. You can register the same way you did for this workshop. But otherwise, we thank you so much for your participation, and please reach out to any one of us for support as you're building your budgets, and we will happily either answer your questions or direct you to the experts who can. Take care, everyone.